And then moving on to the next album, as I've already mentioned, it's just like the flip of a coin, dude. And obviously, we have to mention the breakup of Ariana and Mac in between these two times. And so the world was kind of like looking at Mac at this point, I think, and they're like, okay, how's he gonna deal with it? Um how's he gonna handle it? What's he gonna do and put out this swimming record, which I mean we've talked about in the past like album art, and I think Divine Feminine was a really good example of that gave the vibe for the album. And then you look at the swimming album cover, and I mean that is just heartbreaking in itself. And so right off the bat, though, Come Back to Earth, it's just a completely different Mac than the Divine Feminine. Instantly back to Sad Sign, and he's talking about he's back in his head. You know, he's right back in his head, which is, from my experience, a horrible fucking place to be. At least most of the time, if you spend a greater part of your life in there, then it's never probably going to be good. But then just the theme of his lyrics, all the things I would do to spend a little time in hell, like, damn, Mac, like it's such a dualistic kind of album to Divine Feminine. And so what do you think about this intro, and especially the first part of this album?
Yeah, I think this intro is the perfect picture painting of what the album's about.
Yeah,
It's his tug and pull.
yeah,
His tug and pull of wanting to be high and forget about everything and wanting to just be happy without any sort of drugs. And, right off the bat, obviously, I just need a way out of my head. And that's something that, he talks about all throughout the album is wanting to just get out of his head. He's thinking too much. He needs to get high. And
yeah,
you're talking about the album art. I mean, the album art is I guess he's like inside it looks like he's in the aisle of a plane or something,
yeah,
like just sitting on the floor. And you could look at it that way, but I was also wondering is like maybe this is like some sort of elevator that he's on when he's high, like he's
yeah.
sitting up in the elevator. Because the whole album he talks about being, above the clouds, on top of the clouds and all that. And this is kind of what I've got from that. And he like looks defeated at the same time,
Yeah,
where he's just kind of sitting at the bottom. His feet are dirty, like he feels defeated. And I think it's a great way to paint the picture of the album. But yeah, this whole intro is great. I mean, sunshine don't feel right when you're inside all day. I wish it was nice out, but it looked like rain. Like it's just, I think it gives you a great look into what is going on inside his head.
absolutely agree. And I think as we move throughout the rest of this album, although the production might not necessarily be there, his lyrical side I feel like is the most important on this album, because I feel like when he was producing this album, he was like, okay, this is how I want to feel. This is how I need to portray myself out to the world. This is how I need to be. Even though, but he just couldn't follow through with the lyrics. And not, I'm not saying that he couldn't follow through in a way that made it sound good, but he couldn't follow through with his own kind of vibe that he was trying to portray. And I think Hurt Feelings, the next song, is a perfect example of that, because the production, you get the classic pickup, he's taking on the roller coaster, it's going up, it's a little bit more tempo, but something with Mac and his delivery and his lyrics, I don't feel like matches the production. And again, it sounds good, but the energy that he's giving off from his lyrics and the energy that I feel like he wants to give off in the production are just not there. And that kind of shows that back and forth, I think, that Mac is going through.
Yeah, exactly. I think this album you see it a lot where he wants to make a song sound good and he does a great job of it, but the lyrics kind of change how you see it. I mean,
Yeah,
I was reading through the lyrics, which we'll get to, but What's the Use in 2009 were really the two kind of singles from this album that got big and he performed a lot. And those are kind of more upbeat songs that sound good. But when you really look at the lyrics, it's like, damn, like he was saying some stuff that I never caught before.
yeah,
And Yeah, I think Hurt Feelings is another good example where it's a really kind of like fun song to listen to. Like I always talk about songs you throw on in your car, and this is a good one where you kind of can just vibe to it. But I mean, he's basically spending this whole song talking about his success, but he's talking about how he doesn't like it basically. Like
Yeah,
the success is too much.
yeah.
And there was one line he said, "Always said I want it all, but it ain't enough." And
Hmm.
it's like that where he got everything he wanted and he's still not happy.
Yeah, and I think another kind of initial idea that he puts into this song that kind of is there throughout the whole album is the fact that he's like on a different level and he's like in a different world, or the small world kind of theme, but it's almost like he's creating a separation between him and the audience, and or whoever he's trying to like, I'm that guy. But it's almost as if like it's a lonely kind of thing. It's not like this, I'm the best day ever, I'm not this, I'm better than you, right? It's not this, I'm this Mac Miller, I'm the best, I feel great about it. It's almost like he's trying to give that same vibe, but it feels like a lonely place in his head almost. And so what's the use? Another example, I think, of a bouncy kind of song that he's just trying to match the energy of the production, but can't really do it. Um, it is, I think this one is kind of one of the higher points tempo wise and kind of vibe wise on this album, but still it's not, it's, I always like to compare it to the old Mac that we hear, like the original best day ever Mac and kids Mac. And I just feel like it's not the same. It's the lonely place in his head. And obviously that's a theme throughout this album, but I think on this song as well.
Yeah, and this song I think you get a good idea of kind of how he views his relationship with drugs and alcohol. I mean, he really kind of just spells it out. Like
Yeah.
right off the bat, you can love it, you can leave it. They say you're nothing without it. Don't let them keep you down. Like he's talking about drugs right there,
Hmm.
and then he at the end of that intro he says, "Get a little sentimental when I'm off the juice."
Hmm.
And I just kind of picture him like sitting alone in his apartment or wherever, his house, just thinking about art, whether it's Ariana or something else. It's like he keeps getting brought back to these bad places because of his uses with drugs.
Hmm.
And again, this is another song where he talks about going to space, on drug, which is a drug reference as well, getting high.
Hmm.
And again, the tempo sounds great. It's a really really fun song to listen to, but digging through these lyrics, it just gives you a completely different perspective of what the song is. And like every time I listen to this song now, I feel like I'm gonna have a different kind of mindset when I'm listening to it.
Yeah, and he continues the kind of the commenting on his drug use and his relationships in the next song, only in a more uh somber kind of look at it. And I think that this is a perfect example of the inner battle that's going on with Mac, whether it's on the surface, I look so fine, kind of that line, or where then he says, really, I'm bugging, making something out of nothing. And then another line that hits is in the chorus, or the pre-chorus, where it's like, it ain't perfect, but I don't mind because it's worth it. And I feel like that's Mac trying to, knows what he wants to feel like, and he's trying to feel like, but still he's got these ad libs that it's like, is it actually, and I think that that's a good example of this inner battle that's going on in his head.
Yeah, and in this song, you get both sides of that battle because the pre-chorus, the first one, "I'm treading water, I swear that if I drown, I don't care," which you can either think of that as if he drowns in the drugs or if he drowns in sobriety. It's like I think you could take it both ways. I've looked at it from both angles, and I think both of them look sense or make sense. But then the second pre-chorus, he says, "I'm treading water, I know. If I stop moving, I'll float." So you kind of get both where, again, it's kind of that conversation with himself where he's trying to figure out what's the best thing. Like, should he just give in to all these demons or whatever and just wash away? Or should he just like stop moving, just chill out, and like he'll be fine? And I think this song does a good job of, again, kind of hammering down that theme in this album where he's just conversing with himself, like trying to figure out what's the best path forward.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. We haven't really talked about the swimming necessarily theme so far yet, but this is a real good example of, it's like the question he's asking himself is, if I stop swimming, because I feel like what he's thinking right now is he's swimming. If I stop swimming, am I going to drown or am I going to float? And I think that that's kind of like the bottom line of what his mindset is, at least up until this point in the album. Yeah, but then it takes us into an absolute masterpiece. And Self-Care, you guys all know the song. It's one of those songs where it's like you've heard it a lot, but still every single time it gets better. And I kind of feel like it's this point in the album where it's finally back to the Mac that we kind of know, or one of the best glimpses of the Mac that we kind of know so well, where I feel like the production obviously is insane. And the energy also is there within the lyrics and within his delivery. And then we've already kind of talked about the drop in the second half, but man, does that just fit so well? The bass just fucking rocks you in the brain, and you're like, oh, Oblivion, yeah. It's like, I mean, it's such a genuine Mac song, and I think it's one of his best. So what's your take on Self-Care is?
Yeah, and before diving in, this is a music video I want to talk about. This is one that I actually just recently watched for the first time. This is a good example of Mac's unique music videos. He's inside a coffin buried under dirt. Makes it seem like it's in the ground. He just lights up a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's just kind of chilling. He's buried alive, just kind of chilling. And then he gets a knife out and he starts carving something in to the coffin, and you can't really see what it is until the camera angle changes, and it's Memento Mori, which I'll get into what that is. But then he starts as soon as it shows the Memento Mori, he starts punching in, breaks out of the coffin. But Memento Mori is I think it's a Latin saying, basically that means remember that you will die. And it's something that is not really discussed in modern culture, I think, or at least in American culture. We don't talk about death.
Mm-hmm.
And death is a part of life, and it's something that is going to happen to all of us. And I think the more you can confront death, like the happier you'll be, honestly, because the idea of death is scary, right? Like that we're here now and we will be gone at some point. That simple fact is scary, but when you become comfortable with that and just realize it's going to happen to everyone and everything on earth at some point, I think your relationship with life changes. That's kind of what I personally have realized. And I know a lot of people have said similar things, but there's been a lot of old cultures that have had Memento Mori type of things. Like if you look back to a lot of the like Native American tribes and a lot of the older cultures on earth going back hundreds and thousands of years, there's been a lot of, like, we found cave drawings with skulls on them in the past. Like this is something that basically every culture has realized, like death is a part of life. We need to honor it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And like Dia de los Muertos is, I think it's a Mexican holiday where it's Day of the Dead. You honor the dead, and like it's something that basically every society except us has had. And it's interesting because this point, Mac has talked about death a lot, but he is kind of recognized, that death may be coming for him, or he's at least accepted that, death is a part of life, and he's comfortable with that. And this song is kind of, I think, it was a great song to put that in the music video, the Memento Mori, because I think this song is a perfect kind of example. And, I don't want to skip over the first half too much, but Oblivion is definitely the part where I think most of the takeaways for me come from, even though it's the shorter part of the song. But, he talks about getting stuck in oblivion, and I think that's just another way of saying how he's high all the time, right? And oblivion is this place where he gets high and it's beautiful. He doesn't have to deal with any problems. And I think this song may be the best one, as far as like encapsulating the meaning to this whole album, where he is having this conversation with himself where he knows what he needs to do. Like, he knows that what he's doing isn't necessarily good for his life here on earth, but at the same time, like, he's almost ready to move on. And I think this is like the first song in this album where you really get to see, like, wow, like maybe he just wants to go.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely get that vibe as well. And I think in the final part of the album, you get a couple ties to whether it's Ariana or whether it's or the final part of the song, whether it's Ariana or whether it's this girl, it's this idea. He's like, one of the lines that hits me is just come back to my crib and play some 45s. It's there's still a war outside. It's safer inside, essentially, something like that. And it's like he's kind of calling for that back, that feeling back that he attached to his relationship or whatever it may be. But definitely one of the best songs on the album. And I think that's a good take on it, as well as the music video is really important to kind of contextualize it. And you talked about Memento Mori, and the only thing that really popped up in my mind in American culture that could relate to it is Valor Morgulis, which, if you're a Game of Thrones guy, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, it means all men must die. And so that's kind of like the most recent kind of Memento Mori adjacent kind of thing that I've seen in American culture. But another part in the Game of Thrones is it's like, what do we say to death? And we say not today. But it's almost kind of like the flip side when you look at the song in Mac Miller. And so moving on to Ladders, you kind of get another bounce. You get a little bit more of a bounce, especially after this kind of darker kind of turn at the end of Self-Care, which hits well. But it still feels like Max, obviously, like climbing, right? Somehow you got to find a way is one of the lines that he mentions. But I kind of get this feeling it's like this is where in the album where I'm like, okay, Mac produced a song again about how he wanted to feel and how he wanted to be, but the lyrical side, it's just not there. He's just not able to kind of convey it. Feels so good right now, but it all comes falling down as another example of a line where I kind of get that vibe from it. And so what was your take on that, Hughes? But also, before, because we have Small Worlds next, I still feel like this theme of Mac trying to like separate himself is there, but he's trying to, it's a lonely place where he's at, right? And I think that theme carries on, especially in this kind of part of the album.
Yeah, and I actually think that the two songs, Wings right before this and then Ladders, are the perfect back to back, because it almost makes you think that, like, he's like, Wings is obviously, another drug song where he's talking about flying high, and it's almost like the ladder is like there when he needs to come down. It's like he can't fly down off. He's got to get to that ladder. And yeah, it's the come down, which is another kind of interesting, different kind of part of this, where he, instead of talking about being high all the time, he should also talk about coming down. And of course, he doesn't necessarily paint the best picture for it, which I think shows where he was at, where he didn't think that sobriety was necessarily the best way forward for him, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Where coming down from the high, like, you can see he starts to see all those negatives again, where when he's high, he's just got this clouded vision, but it's like he still wants to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about somehow he got to find a way, no matter how many miles it takes. I know it feels so good right now, but it all comes crash or it all comes falling down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like he knows that living in oblivion is not going to last forever. He
Yeah.
knows that it's a temporary thing, that when the sun rises, it's gone. And it's just another really nice showcase of what he's thinking, where it's like he wants to do it, but he just can't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's like a theme, like I've mentioned throughout the whole album, but a line that I really want to mention in Wings in comparison to the Divine Feminine is well, first off, love so much that my heart got broke. I mean, that's obvious. That's obvious. Like, kind of look back at the Divine Feminine, but also he says Lucifer is human and so are we. Whereas last album, he was talking about like no more I got angels, no more Satan, and now it's kind of feel like Lucifer or Satan has kind of come back into his life. But then Small Worlds, Hughes, Small Worlds, another kind of somber song where I feel like Max, it's good and it sounds good, but the energy coming from Mac just it isn't there. And like in the Tiny Desk concert, I think that's one of the ones he played, and you're like, man, like this guy, I feel like he's just got nothing left almost, and in the lyrics, um, it's like nobody knows me again. This separation from himself and the world is just getting bigger and bigger as the world seems to be getting smaller for him.
Yeah, exactly. I think he titled this one perfectly. He's trying to make it known that like the more famous he gets, it's like the idea of, oh, small world, you ran into someone out in public or whatever. And as you get more and more famous, it's like, wow, it's a tiny freaking world. I run into people I know all the time. But at the same time, he doesn't really feel that connection. Like a lot of these people they probably want something out of him. That's something that he's talked about a lot, which is obviously not a new idea among celebrities. The more famous you get, the more friends you get, kind of thing, where all of a sudden
Hmm.
all these people, hey, remember I'm your third cousin. I haven't talked to you in 20 years. And
Yeah.
oh yeah, that's interesting that you're famous now. I guess maybe you can cut me a check.
Yeah, I was about to
There's
say, you got an extra grand? You got an extra
yeah.
grand
I'm a
couple?
little down on my luck right now. I could use a little bit of cash. There's a lot of that, and he's never gotten actually specific about anything. I mean, I'm thinking of Kanye, who talks about his cousin stealing his laptop to sell it back to him.
Yeah.
Like there's some artists that they literally will call the person out, like, or they will at least talk about the story. And Mac never really did that. Like he never really got too specific about friends or family members wanting stuff. But they did. It's just what comes with money and fame. It's sadly one of the major downfalls of the human is that we're greedy, we're selfish, and any way we can get what we need, we'll go for it. And a lot of times we justify doing it, even if it's obviously not the right thing to do. And I've talked in the past about how we don't look at celebrities as our fellow humans a lot. We look at them as some sort of god that has overcome being human and they're untouchable. And I think that's why a lot of people try to drag them down. I mean, Alex Burr, and JD Hall just did a podcast on cancel culture recently, which kind of goes into that too, where people will take any opportunity they can to bring someone that's achieved something down. And I imagine a lot of celebrities face that too, where they find people and these people will just claw at them and get every ounce of blood out of them they can, as
Hmm.
long as it benefits them. So I think that's kind of what he was trying to get at in the song. And it was an important, I think, piece of this album too, where, as you mentioned, he's trying to separate his career from who he used to be and also just other people in general that aren't him, that maybe wanted to be him and tried and failed. But at the same time, he's like, it's not what it's all made up to be. It's not necessarily worth it. And I think the outro for this one is really interesting though. It's kind of him just like talking over like kind of a like almost a moody, like I don't know what the word is, but it's just kind of like a dark little beat, talking about, you know, feeling his fingers slipping and like he gets it wrong all the time. And there was the end of it I really connected with when I first heard it. Win or lose, I don't keep count, nobody checking. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was, it's funny because it's hard to relate to someone like him a lot as far as success or whatever, winning and losing. But we all can relate to that where we think people care what we do and don't do, and really it's not like that at all. The more that you stop caring, I think the more you realize that no one's checking on your wins and losses. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a realization he had, and that's why he included it, that he was kind of trying to monitor maybe how people saw him.
Yeah.
And after a while he figured it's worthless. Like it's not worth the mental space.
Yeah, that kind of takes me back to like a Kanye quote where it's like a big thing on TikTok or Instagram right now where people like will go over the voice and it's Kanye saying, "Everybody wants to know what I'd do if I didn't win." And he's like, "I guess we'll never find out," you know? But that's like the opposite of what Mac is portraying. It's like, man, no one gives a fuck. And Kanye, obviously on the other end of the spectrum, is like, I never lost. Never lost. But I think he continues that kind of aspect in the next song, Conversation Part One. But I think this is also, as you mentioned, in the divine feminine part of it, this is also one where you can look at as like a conversation almost to himself as well. And so I think that this is a really good point in the album. And I think this is a really revealing point in the album as well.
Yeah, this one to me was a really strong song lyrically and kind of theme wise, because it's called Conversations, which we've been talking this whole album that it's basically a conversation between himself. But he makes it seem like a conversation between himself and also not a conversation between himself at the same time, which I think kind of just, you know, is part of his genius. But you know, he's talking, it really makes it seem like he's talking to people that want to be successful and like kind of shitting on them. But
Mm-hmm.
the more the more you read, it's like he talks about like all you sit around the house getting faded, that ain't entertainment. You missing every single shot you taken. And it's like, it seems like he's just talking to some idiot high school kid that says he wants to be a rapper and is smoking weed all the time. But it also makes it seem like he's talking to himself, where he's like, all this time I'm sitting around wasting getting high, I could be doing things like
Mm-hmm.
positive in the world. And like I've done a lot, I've achieved a lot, but there's more I could be doing, and I'm sitting around wasting my time doing, you know, stupid stuff that is not really entertainment. It's just getting high. And like that's something that he's talked about throughout this album. And I think in later songs we'll get to it more, where he's his entertainment is basically getting high because he can get out of reality.
Yeah.
He gets to this alternate reality where he's high and he's, you know, tripping on whatever and he's thinking about crazy stuff in his head. But that's a fake world. And again, another point of self-awareness where he realizes that this is not entertainment, but he still can't help himself from doing it.
Yeah. It's like he's gotten dug a hole so deep that it's his life right now, you know? And so that gets us into Dunno, which is one of my favorite songs on the album, honestly. But this seems to be like one of the first like direct songs about the breakup, about his life with Ariana Grande to an extent, talking about just talking about the times with her. Wouldn't you rather get along until there's no longer? Let's get lost inside the cloud. It's like he's trying to, although Ariana was like trying to break him out of his habits, which is why we saw, I think, so much of a more up-tempo look at his life in Divine Feminine. It's like he's kind of succumbed to a bunch of these habits now, and he wants her back, and he's like, why don't you just come get high, come get in this cloud with me?
Yeah, it's like he almost feels like the only way he can connect to her, like on a true 100% level, is like when they're high together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's kind of like a sad way to look at it, where it's like he wants to show her almost how he feels or something. and he's trying to talk her into, getting high with him and live inside this cloud. And
Hmm.
it's like, gosh, I think it's a great song again to showcase the theme and where he's at, where he it's like he can't give up getting high, even though he knows that Ariana is what could really save him. It's like it's that tug and pull where he really wants that light. Like he wants to reach for that light, but the clouds is like where he's more comfortable at.
Yeah.
And it's almost like he's scared to take that leap, even though he knows that it's what he needs to do. And the path he's on right now is going to take him to the place, obviously, it ended up taking him.
Yeah, and you definitely get that in the next one with Jet Fuel, which is all about kind of his relationship with drugs. And, I think that this is where, although 2009 is a bit different, but this is where you kind of start going down the descending staircase almost, of where he eventually, ends up.
Yeah, and first of all, from a sonic standpoint, this song is awesome.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
it sounds so good. It's one of my favorite songs on this album for sure. But yeah, I mean, again, his titling is great on this album.
hmm,
Jet Fuel is again a drug reference where he's high and he'll never run out of jet fuel because he's rich and he has unlimited
yeah,
access to drugs.
yeah,
And gosh, there was a song earlier. I forget which one it was, but he was talking about that same thing where he's got his medicine, he's got an endless supply of medicine, and he's good. And again, it's just, gosh, it's like it listening to it after he passed away from all this is just crazy. I mean, because you just as you mentioned, like the descending staircase, you see where he's going.
yeah,
And this point especially, it's like it's almost like there's no hope. You
yeah,
feel like
yeah,
he's never going to run out of jet fuel. He's basically admitting that like he's not strong enough to withstand participating in, taking drugs because he's got unlimited supply, and as soon as he feels down, he's going to go to that supply.
hmm,
And it's almost like he's given in where there's nothing he can do because it's too hard not to, give into that.
yeah. And then you got 2009, which is kind of like a look back into his own life to an extent, right? And a line that really stands out to me is, yeah, I know what's behind that door. And it's like, I feel like he's trying to make the audience think like it's a decent thing, but as we've seen, put in context of the whole album, it's like he knows what's behind that door and it hasn't been good for him almost.
Yeah, and I think the second verse in this one for me is really interesting. So he says, "They ask me what I'm smiling for. Well, because I've never been this high before. I've never felt this alive before. I'd rather have me peace of mind than war." And I think that's one where you can almost look at it from both
Yeah.
angles, where you can look at it from a sobriety standpoint and say he's never been this high before, like he's high on life. And that's what's got him smiling, and he's at peace, and like he doesn't want to have to battle all these demons all the time, and he's happy. But then you could also look at it from the other side where he's high and it's like I've never been this high before, like this is what puts me at peace, and sobriety, I'm at war.
Hmm.
So it's another one, and Mac has talked about this. He did a couple interviews right before he passed away about this, where he talks about how he's not going to really paint the picture for you specifically to show what this is about. He leaves a lot up to interpretation, and this is one moment where it's like it could be both, where you get that tug and pull where it's like either he has found sobriety and he's happy, or he realizes that he's just way happier when he's high. And
Hmm.
it kind of gives you both, where it's something that you have to figure out on your own. But either way, obviously, the way it turned out, it's depressing because either he, found sobriety and just that one time was enough to take him out, or he just, again, going off of jet fuel, he just gave in and he realized, I'm going to be happy doing this. And if it takes me, it takes me.
And then we get to the final song. And Hughes, man, like, you want to talk about fucking chills, dude. It's disgusting. It really is disgusting how kind of weird that this kind of piece fits into his life, right? And the Kurt Vonnegut reference, Slaughterhouse-Five, so it goes. Every time someone dies, it's so it goes. And then I don't know if you knew this, I don't know if you saw it on Genius, but the song So It Goes was featured in his last ever Instagram story. And that, I mean, you want to talk about why we've been down bad this past week? It's because it's like, it's just weird how it kind of all fits into this like puzzle, right? And it's like this final piece kind of just is the final piece, literally the final piece of it all. And obviously we have Circles, which kind of brings us back around a little bit naturally. But I know you wanted to talk about this one. I know this one has been, you've been waiting on this, but this is just an absolute chilling song, but with a decent vibe, and it's a decent vibe. That's the worst part. It's like, it sounds good, but man, knowing the context, it's insane.
Yeah, man, this one was for me crazy. I mean, I think it was maybe back in February or March. I put this album on for, it wasn't the first time because I listened to it right when it came out in 2018, but I've changed so fucking much over the past 2-3 years. Like, a lot of this stuff didn't click beforehand. Like when I was 2018, we were still in college. Like, I was an idiot. I didn't know what any of this stuff meant. So it sounded good, but I didn't connect with it.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I've changed a lot since then. And earlier this year, I was listening to it in my car, just on a long, kind of like went for a long drive. And I heard this song for the first time, like really in my current mind state. And I'm like, holy shit, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, first of all, so 2009 is obviously a very upbeat, like happy vibe song where you got really nice strings and it just sounds really nice. This song is, God, it's just like deep, dark, like, I can't even really describe the beat much, but it's like, it's a way different vibe. And I listened to that the first time and I'm like, man, like, he really just like wrote a goodbye note at the end of this album.
Yeah.
And the more you research it, the Kurt Vonnegut thing and the Instagram story right before he died. And he had a tweet that was deleted too the night before, that night, where I don't know why he deleted it, but he was talking about John Bryan, who I think I've talked about before. John Bryan he produced, I think, 8 of the 13 tracks on this song, and he was the one that ended up finishing Circles.
Mm-hmm.
He had a huge impact on Mac in his late career. And next week I'll talk more about him because he had a huge impact on Circles.
Absolutely.
But he tweeted how, because the end of this song is like, if it's just something you have to listen to, and I have goosebumps right now just thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like just the way with the strings and all that's entailed, like it sounds like you're ascending to heaven. It's like, it feels like you open your arms up and you're being taken, like when you listen to it. And he tweeted about that, about John Bryan. And it's like, God, man, like it's like he fucking wrote this story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is his last song. He's going to make it sound like he's being taken to heaven after this song comes out and it's over. And it's just so weird. And like last night I was listening to it again and I knew 2009 was coming to an end and I was just preparing myself. And I started feeling way different because I knew this song was going to come on. It's something that it's like almost indescribable of the feeling it gives you with just the sound and what he's saying isn't necessarily so crazy. I mean, it feels like he's recapping his career almost and kind of passing the baton on to the next artist, whoever that is, or the next group of artists. He's it just feels like he's done, like he's passing it on, and
Yep.
he's gone. And it's just like, God, it's again, it's one of those things that it's like you can't even fully describe the feeling of it, because it's just, it puts you in a place where it's like, holy shit, like this was it really just feels like he planned for this to be his last song.
Yeah. No, genuinely. And that's, that's what music does. Like it really does bring this like indescribable feeling. Obviously knowing the context makes it even that more chilling. But and sometimes that's what you gotta leave it with. Like just listen to the fucking song, listen to the album, man. Like because it is his last like note, and Circles obviously he released a posthumous album, but like you mentioned, John Bryan was like the major architect in that, really. And so uh kind of glad this week's over, Hughes. It's kind of got me in a place. I talked about being an empath, man. I just kind of feed off of other people's vibes, and man, this has been a rough one, absolute rough one. But there's no doubt that Mac Miller is an absolute mastermind and just a phenomenal musician with the lyrics, with the production, especially as we mentioned in these two albums, just the ability to kind of put it all together. And man, in Swimming, did he not kind of put it all together only in a somber tone? And so